Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee on March the 4th at 1 o'clock. I'm Tony Mancini, and it's great to have everybody here with us today. Let's do a little roll call. Maybe we could start with the committee members. Councillor Sean Cleary, how are you today?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am here, ready to get to work and clean up our environment.
Fantastic. From beautiful District 1, and my partner in that area, Kathy Daigle-Gammon. Good afternoon, Kathy.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. It's a beautiful, beautiful sunny day in Fall River today, but all ready to talk all things good in climate.
Fantastic. I see that Catherine Morris has joined us. Catherine, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Councillor Mancini and everyone on the call. Look forward to the meeting this afternoon.
And last but not least, my partner in crime in Dartmouth, Councillor Sam Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm here and ready to go.
Thank you. And of course, I see Councillor Lovelace just popped into the screen. Councillor Lovelace, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Beautiful day here in Hannah's Plain, St. Margaret's. Happy to join you all. See these happy faces.
Thank you, Councillor. And maybe we could go through a little roll call and staff. I apologize if I miss anybody. Kevin Bootler, you're here, Kevin?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chair. Happy to be here.
Good afternoon, Shannon Miedema.
Good afternoon, everybody.
David Greener, our legal counsel.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm here.
Ms. Denty, Kelly Denty.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members.
And I believe Web Representative in Parks and Rec, Mr. Mullane. Are you with us, Rob?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair.
And Mr. Harvey, I think you're joining also on the Parks and Rec side. Is that correct?
Good afternoon.
And I just see that Councillor Russell is jumped into the screen. Councillor, welcome.
Thank you very much. Have a great day and welcome to everybody from Sackville.
And Shannon Betts, I see Shannon, you're online.
I am here. Good afternoon, everyone.
Hey, Shannon. Am I missing anybody on the staff side, Haruka?
Chair, we also have Bharathi Aseki-Mutu, who is new to my team as another clean energy specialist, and she's going to co-present the hydrogen report to you today with Kevin.
Oh, fantastic. And how new is she, Shannon?
November start.
Wow.
Just made it to Halifax in January. She started in Toronto.
Toronto.
Yeah.
We'll fix that part of it. Welcome very much. Welcome to the Environment Committee and welcome to HRM. That's fantastic. Glad to have you. We look forward to your presentation later on. Awesome. And there may be other staff, so welcome to all staff. Well, let's get started. We'll call this meeting to order. First thing we'd like to do is approval of the minutes from February 4th, 2021.
Councillor Cleary moves the minutes.
Councillor Cleary moves it. A seconder?
I'll second that, Councillor Austin.
Councillor Austin, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
We have approved minutes. Approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Madam Clerk, do we have any additions to the agenda?
Nothing from the clerk's office.
And anything from the committee? If not, we can have someone move the approval of the order of business.
So moved, Councillor Cleary.
Mr. Cleary, a seconder.
Lovelace.
And Councillor Lovelace seconds it. All in favor?
Aye.
And anyone opposed? We now have an agenda. Any business arising out of the minutes? Seeing none, call for declaration of conflict of interest. None. Motion of reconsideration, motion of rescission, consideration of deferred business, and notice of table matters all fall into the none category. And now we're at number 10, correspondence, petitions, and delegations. Madam Clerk, are there any correspondence or petitions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So there is one correspondence from the Canadian Institute for Climate Choices, and this correspondence was circulated to the committee, and there's no petition from the clerk's office.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Any petitions from the committee members? Nope. Okay. So now we're roll up our sleeves and we get to it. So we have actually 3 presentations today that we're looking forward to. The first one is 10.3.1, mobilizing universities to solve wicked problems in HRM. And where does the water go? And we are very fortunate to have Dr. Jonathan Fowler and Dr. Linda Campbell. Jonathan, good to see you again.
Let's see here. Now, I just turned on my mic so I can say good to see you as well. Can you hear me as well as see me?
We can hear you as well. And so this is the second presentation I've seen in a couple of weeks. Where are we taking you next week, Jonathan? We'll have to find another place for you.
Well, it's yet to be determined, but hopefully someplace warm.
And your colleague is with you, Dr. Campbell is with you also?
In her remote setting, I believe so.
Yes, hello.
Hey, Dr. Campbell, welcome. Good to have you. Well, we want to give you the floor. The floor is yours. We see your slide deck is up, and you've got 10 minutes. And welcome and thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for not only the invitation but the work that this committee does. I think we could probably all agree there are a few more important matters for all of us to be considering than this one. And I'd like to start by making the contention or the assertion that all sustainability inquiry is essentially historical inquiry. Now, I would say that because I'm coming to you as an archaeologist and a historian, but I'll make the case like this. I sometimes tell my students that if we wanted to, we could create a photograph of me holding up a Volkswagen. And if you took that photo in exactly the right moment, I would look like the strongest man on earth. 2 seconds later, it would be a very different photograph. And the point is, in a brief span of time, you cannot measure how sustainable something is. Sustainability is not something that takes meaning outside of the concept of time. And that's really the challenge that we're facing. As a society, like the Volkswagen, we've been engaging in a lot of behaviors that were in the moment apparently okay, but as history unfolds, we come to discover these things are not sustainable. So to understand all of this, you require a historical perspective. So I'll get to the bottom line of our presentation. We're here to collaborate. If you think in your work there's anything that we can offer to you, we would hope that you'd reach out and just let us know. I'll say a few more words about my work. Dr. Campbell will say a few about hers, and then we'll create a little time here for some discussion, hopefully. So could we please go to the next slide? We're starting in New York, of course. That's not the Halifax skyline. Maybe wait 10 years. Some of you may be familiar with this project, the Mannahatta project, which was undertaken by Eric Sanderson at the Wildlife Conservation Society, led by him, started in the very late 90s. And it was a project whose goal was to reconstruct the ecological history of Manhattan Island. And as the story goes, this project originated with a map. Sanderson stumbled upon this old British military map. Some of you may also know that in the period of the American Revolutionary War, New York was the headquarters of the British Army and Navy during those years. And so there were lots of military engineers running around and drawing pretty maps. This is a very detailed, highly resolved map of Manhattan Island as it was at that time. And it's an astounding little excursion in time travel to look at a map like this and then compare it to the urban environment that we see today. So Sanderson used this and then other maps and began to reconstruct what that landscape looked like throughout centuries of development, right back into the pre-contact period, ecological history at its finest. If we could go to the next one. Now, it just so happens that when that army left New York, it came to a place called Halifax. And among the staff was a fellow by the name of Charles Blaskowitz. And a few years ago, when I was conducting research in the United Kingdom at the National Archives, I stumbled upon my own map. And this was the Blaskowitz map of the peninsula of Halifax. And I'm only showing you a detail of this. That archive is incredible. It's vast, as you can imagine. And so vast is it that you go to the computer and you put in what you want, and you take it to the counter, and the people in the back drive golf carts, and they drive off into the distance, you know, shelves and shelves, and they come back with these great cloth bags with maps. And this one is about the size of a ping pong table. You roll it out, it's astounding. And what it shows is, in addition to human development on the landscape, the old downtown Halifax, you can see here labeled the previous citadel before the one we see today, the naval yard, other things. It also maps in great detail topography and water courses, both standing water, brooks, streams, including freshwater river, illustrated here, which sometimes makes the news for bursting its banks at the bottom of Inglis and Barrington Street, flooding garages and the like. So this kind of map is something that I've been living with for a number of years and introducing to my students. If we could go to the next one, next slide, please, number 3. It gives you a sense of what we can do with these maps. Just like Dr. Sanderson was doing in New York, we can take them into a GIS environment, a software environment where we can collate historical maps and plans to modern map imagery to correct for the distortions, and we can plot ancient features in the modern world. We can also, and the image on the left signifies this, we can also marry that to LiDAR data, which of course we've had in recent years, very important data set, aerial laser mapping, which gives you very highly resolved elevation data of a landscape. So we can also drape these historical plans over the LiDAR data to help us further understand landscape histories. So this is an example of the kind of work that we do in the anthropology department with students of archaeology and history. And I'll now yield to my colleague, Dr. Campbell, who'll give you a little bit more information about her work, more in the realm of environmental sciences.
Hello, thank you so much. And thank you for bringing up those slides. And to build on Dr. Fowler's presentation, I want to talk about mapping as well and the importance of mapping from the historical perspective and moving forward into the future. There is a case study that was just started with an honors thesis student who I'm co-supervising with Dr. Erin Cameron, and within the environmental science department. And her honors thesis is looking at salinity and road salting and the impacts of that to HRM. And you can see a picture here. This is the student Sahana standing by the salt pile, which is in Dartmouth, and it's right adjacent to Black Lake in Dartmouth. And you can see this beautiful lake right next to it. That is Black Lake in Dartmouth. And when you're looking at it, it looks beautiful, but it is one of the highest conductivity salinity values that we've seen for freshwater lakes. And so then we saw this information, we asked ourselves, where does the salt go? The historical maps are really important for us to understand the patterns of movement and why the salt is moving the way it does in the environment. And next slide, please, Hiruka. And so there's 2 maps illustrated here on this slide. They're modern maps. And the one showing conductivity on the left, and that is measuring how well the water can conduct electrons. And it's a base measurement for the ions in the water, and it's typically related to salinity. And then on the right-hand side, it is showing the chloride concentrations in the water. And so we're layering the data, and this is from the synoptic analysis of lakes, the 50 lakes that are done across HRM. And so that data was layered over the road salting data plan that we have from HRM winter operations. And you can see the conductivity is higher where more road salt is deposited. And if we go to the chloride map on the right-hand side, you can see the red and blue dots there. The blue is representative of the chloride concentrations below the Canadian Council of Ministers of the Environment guidelines, CCME, and then the red is above that guideline. And when we're looking here at our lakes, quite a few of them are above or close to that threshold limit. And our work is showing other groups as well. And we have the Dr. Scott at Dalhousie and other people who are working on this. And it's repeatedly showing that road salt is not only an issue for one lake, it is a HRM-wide issue that we need to face. And the challenges that we've had to date is that there are groups established, but they focus just on one lake or just on one report, or they're looking at where the complaints about the lake are happening more often, but there isn't any consistent, systematic approach to looking at water quality across the HRM and layering that with other possible causes. And so we do need that approach, that systematic approach, to protect our rivers and lakes here within the HRM, including the ones that have been buried as well. And so this is what we're hoping to have a conversation moving forward with. Thank you, and I will turn it back over to Jonathan, and I'm happy to answer any questions after the presentation. Thank you.
That's great, and there's our final slide with our contact details, and with that we will turn it over to you all, and we invite your questions and comments, and we hope this is the beginning of a longer conversation.
Well, Dr. Fowler, Dr. Campbell, thank you very much for the presentation. And you know, you were just short of 46 seconds, bang on. So you guys practiced. Well done. Well, look, thank you very much for that presentation. I'll look to my committee colleagues for questions. The first question I see is Councillor Austin. Councillor Austin, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not so much a question, more a comment. I think there is some wonderful opportunity here to work together and collaborate. I know we will be seeing from our meeting the other day, Mr. Chair, with staff, an HRM program gearing up in the next year or two regarding water testing in our lakes, and certainly salt is one of our major issues that we know is something that we as through our city, through development, through our road clearing it is us, right, that is causing that. So I think there is a lot of opportunity to collaborate here, and so I know actually Shannon Miedema is on the call, so the appropriate staff person has been here to hear the presentation, and I'm very confident that we can work together in the future.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cleary, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Jonathan and Linda, for the presentation. I've talked to both of you before about various issues, and particularly with Dr. Campbell, water quality issues, and I noticed some of those red dots on your maps are in my district, and so one of the things that I've been doing is I've been working with our road operations staff in Transportation and Public Works to reduce the amount of salt that is used on our roads, particularly around Williams Lake. And that's an area that we've made a sizable investment in the several of millions of dollars now to create the Shaw Wilderness Park. And we know we have water quantity issues. And of course, we are also concerned, based on the measurements that the Williams Lake Conservation Company has done of conductivity and salinity, and some of the work that Dr. Patriquin has done, that we don't want to lose the life in a lake. So I guess two questions for Dr. Campbell. One, can I have those maps? And the other question is, what are the outcomes that will happen if we don't reduce the amount of salt that is getting into some of our urban lakes on flora, on fauna, on diversity? And what are it's hard not to put some salt into the environment just because you've got to keep roads free and safe. So what are the things that we could be doing or doing differently to make it better for our lakes?
Thank you, Councillor. Dr. Campbell?
Thank you. And thank you, Chair, for allowing me the time to answer the questions of Councillor Cleary. And so the maps are not a problem to share. If you wouldn't mind waiting for Sahana to defend her honors thesis, and then afterwards I can send you the whole package to that. That's not a problem at all. If you don't mind waiting, it's a couple of weeks before she is doing her defense. And then moving on to your second question, Williams Lake is a very good example of the advocacy that can be done effectively for focusing on one lake. But part of the challenge that we as a city have to deal with is that we typically tend to only look at it at a singular lake level, but we're not looking at a watershed level, because Williams Lake connects to other lakes in that same watershed, and the salt might be coming from other lakes and going to. And so we have to look at a bigger scale and working with each individual lake association that has been established, but also looking beyond that level as well. If we stop salting just in one part of the road, but we're still salting in other parts of the roads up higher in the system, it's still going to be problematic. And another thing as well, Jonathan was talking about the temporalness of sustainability. And so historical data is very important for us, obviously. And as we get better at reducing our salt load and using the salt more efficiently, it's really important to continuing monitoring and make sure that the salt is actually reducing within the lakes through time. And so monitoring is very important.
It's interesting because, sorry, I was just going to say for Williams Lake, you're right. So it feeds from Coal Pit Lake, which feeds from Governor's Brook, which feeds from the watershed all through Spryfield over to Dunbrack. And that's a provincial highway. We've got Herring Cove Road. We've got all the subdivisions that are essentially loading that salt, and it will eventually make its way down to Williams Lake. And that is one of the challenges, and one of the things that I'm very proud of working with the Williams Lake Conservation Company is their advocacy now is no longer just for the lake, but for the entire watershed, which makes it trickier to make the connection for a lot of residents who live sometimes hundreds of meters or maybe kilometers away from where the salt will end up. And so I'm appreciating that kind of thinking process. However, it does make it a bigger challenge to deal with.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary. Appreciate it. Next, I have Councillor Catherine Morris. You have the floor, Catherine.
Thanks very much to you both for the presentation. That was really interesting. I love seeing those older maps that I've never seen anything like those before. So thank you. My personal feeling is that we need to see more buffer strips and conservation areas around all of our lakes, and I'm wondering how much you think that could make a difference, even if they're just narrow. If we had vegetated buffers around the lakes, would that reduce the salt significantly?
And yes, that is where, and thank you for that question. I'm making sure I'm wanting to follow the process as well. Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to answer that question. All right, so yes, Jonathan made a very important point about that in terms of conversation, is we need to see where we've been and how the environment is changing through time. And so buffer strips are a really good question to rise. And Sahana is looking at the salt within soil as well as part of her honors thesis, and transects from the road to the lake at various distances. And so she's starting to look at that work right now, but there aren't many people who have done that type of work. There is some good work out there in piecemeal, but just not to the level. And so the buffer strips would obviously have to depend on the soil quality, the type of vegetation that is there, and as well, of course, the size and the width of that buffer zone, and how much water is in the water table as well is also important to look at. So all of those factors are quite important. So I think that would be a really great idea, yes. But I wouldn't be able to offer any recommendations without knowing more about all of those variables with an H around those specifics that I mentioned.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lovelace, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much for this presentation. I've been talking a lot over the past few years about quality stormwater management, and how we can make sure that first of all, we know what's in that stormwater, where it's going, and how we can mitigate the effects. I represent a rural area where people are very protective and concerned about their well water and the water table overall, because we don't have a monitoring program in HRM, and also we have the provincial government managing stormwater in some areas of the municipality, and then HRM managing stormwater, on HRM roads, which is a much smaller portion of the municipality, from a geographic area. And so, in thinking about how we can think a little bit bigger around the connections of the lakes and so on, and the various different jurisdictional issues and various policies that we can develop is extremely important. I'm very grateful for this presentation, and also like Catherine Morris, love the maps. Just really good. And I just want to say too, good luck to Sahana for her defending her master's thesis. That's very exciting, and maybe she'll look at doing a PhD on quality stormwater management. But my question to you is, in thinking about how we can address that larger issue of quality, water tables, because while we are looking and thinking about monitoring our lakes, that is important, but we know that overall watershed issue is extremely important to the actual potable water that we have in wells. And while we only have a few lake systems that actually feed the downtown core and feed Halifax water with thousands of people, thinking about that thinking about that watershed protection and the bigger picture overall for the province, right? So while we think about watersheds in HRM, those watersheds are important outside of those kind of arbitrary boundaries as well. So I'm just wondering whether or not there's research or thinking along the lines of how do we actually protect those various different watersheds, as well as think about how we can, create policy that protects that stormwater management that feeds into, that quality of water that feeds into our watersheds.
Dr. Campbell?
Yes, thank you. And that's a huge challenge that we're facing, because there was a lot of shared responsibility when we're looking at this. We're looking at stormwater and potable water as well. And at a watershed level, we have the province, we have HRM, we have Halifax Water, all with different jurisdictions. So I think bringing everyone to the table and having a conversation is important. It is important, and I think it is worth making the time to get everybody in the same room, looking at maps, looking at the data, and making sure that there is a consistent monitoring through time. And that conversation just has to start, and I certainly agree with you.
Dr. Fowler?
Yeah, only briefly to add that I sometimes refer to the mindset, and I think there's a mindset problem here. I sometimes refer to the mindset that we're suffering under as presentism, the notion that what you see is what you get when you look at the land. And so we have a planning process that is very present oriented and not trained to reflect on those changes over time that we were referring to. So anything we can do to encourage planners at all levels, and of course this is a multi-jurisdictional problem, it's a typical Canadian problem of many jurisdictions, but anything we can do to encourage planners at all levels to reflect on change over time and that landscape setting that I alluded to, I think would be helpful.
Sounds like we need a communities of practice building here. Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate this.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no more questions, if I'd like to make some comments and some questions, if I may. First of all, I love the maps also. Love the fact that you included the pizza corner, how to engage your students by including the pizza corner. Well done, Jonathan. Outstanding. I hear the message quite well, Dr. Campbell. I think we do look at, when HRM looks at our lakes, we look at the singular lakes, right? A perfect example, Councillor clearly alluded to the lake that he's associated with because of his district. Councillor Austin and I share a lake system that goes from Lake Charles to Micmac, that flows into Micmac, and Micmac flows into Bannock. And, you talk about salt, Dr. Campbell, and we've got some major issues with Lake Micmac and Lake Bannock with blue-green algae and weeds. And in the recommendation that's come back, is to look at, buffering strips around that area, but those are small pieces. And in the Monitor Lake, I'm very pleased and happy that we've got that, we're moving on that direction of monitoring not only a few lakes, but all the lakes in our HRM, and that's the direction that we're going into. What I hear, is there, Dr. Campbell, you alluded to getting everybody in the room together. That's not set up though, is it, at this point in time? Is that set up, Dr. Campbell, Dr. Fowler? Is there a meeting set up to get everybody in the room together?
I don't believe so from my perspective, and I suppose one of the functions of our conversation today is to open the door to that possibility.
So here's my commitment to the committee and to all of you, the opportunity to get in the room for just a conversation to expand on our conversation today. Obviously, HRM and Shannon Minima is on the line. Kelly Denty from Planning is on the line. Halifax Water needs to be part of that conversation. The Nova Scotia Department of Environment needs to be part of that conversation. So my takeaway today is to see if we can make that happen. Just to explore that further. I think that can go a long way to make sure we're on the same page. Councillor Cleary, I see you punching in. Did you want to add to that, or?
No, I wholeheartely agree, Mr. Chair. I just wonder if that would be an informal kind of get together, or if you're looking for a motion for something more formal.
I think that my thought is informal at first. Let's just have a conversation, and then maybe we need to come up with something more formal. I think my thoughts, committee members, your thoughts on that? Yep. Yeah. Dr. Campbell, go ahead.
And I would like to mention as well that there are other experts that could provide knowledge and insight, and they certainly could join this conversation. And so that informal conversation would provide us with an opportunity to have a conversation, and there's other experts that can be involved as well.
Well, good. So thank you for that. Let me go ahead and chat with some of these folks, and then we can come back to you. And if we get agreement, which I believe we can, I see no issue at all with all the HRM folks, and we've reached out to the province before, and they understand. And as we know, there's new leadership when it comes to the province, both with the environment minister and the new premier, that are very focused on the environment. So maybe this is an opportunity for us, right? The window is open. Let's step through the window. So seeing no more questions, I thank you both, Dr. Fowler, Dr. Campbell. Thank you so much for taking the time to come out here today. Fantastic. Jonathan, I'll see where I can get you next. I can be your agent, man. I'll get you on the road. We'll go on the road.
We'll start at Pizza Corner.
That's good to me.
All right.
Fantastic.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you both. All the best to you.
Thank you.
Well, great discussion, colleagues. That's fantastic. We now move on to our next presenter, 10.3.2, the power of the drag marker. It sounds like a Hitchcock movie, but I think we have Haruka. Do we have Alex online?
Yes, I see Alex in the meeting. So Alex, if you can press *6 to mute yourself, and you can start by identifying your name when called upon by the chair.
So Alex, if you're on the line, just let us know that you are on the line.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Can you just try that again? Alex, just speak up a little bit. There's a little on the low side.
Oh, sorry. Hi, can you hear me now?
We can. Alex, welcome to the Environment and Sustainability Committee. We look forward to your presentation. You have 10 minutes. Your slide deck is now up, and I believe the clerk will be advancing the slides. Just identify the next slide, and we'll let you know when we're coming close to the end of the time frame. But Alex, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So let me begin. So to begin, let me sum up the definition of marker recycling in 4 words: easy, effective, cheap, necessary. Switch slide, please. So, but first, you need to know what marker recycling is before we can begin this presentation. So it's where we have a bin. Now, this bin can be placed anywhere where people will see it, like a community center, for instance. people drop off their used, dried out markers inside of the bin, and whenever the bin becomes full, we ship it out to a processing facility for them to repurpose the marker plastic. That's really all there is to marker recycling. And now I'm going to ask you to switch the slide again, please. Okay, so let me begin with the first point, easy. So here's what happens if every single public facility in Halifax was to participate in marker recycling. So this would be the best case scenario. Number one, the first step is that you would need to get exactly 71 labeled cardboard boxes, one for each public facility in Halifax, including the suburbs. Number two, you need to promote the message via social media, word of mouth, and local announcements. And number three, when the boxes are full, you would need to print out a shipping label to send to a processing facility for them to repurpose the markers. And that's really all there is to marker recycling for the steps that the city of Halifax would need to do. That's why it's easy. So next slide, please. Effective. Diesel fuel. This is the most important part because it's actually the end product. It's what happens to these markers when you ship them away to be recycled. So here is exactly how that would work. Markers are melted through a process called pyrolysis. So that's basically something that applies heat to the markers, but without oxygen. So it's like melting the markers, but because there's no oxygen, there's zero burning. So making marker diesel fuel means there is zero CO2 or greenhouse gases released in the actual process. And sulfur, which is a gas that contributes to acid rain and pollution, is actually really heavily present in conventional fuels that we would get at the gas station. But this fuel is a little different because they remove all the polluting sulfur particles through like an oxidization process and through a filtration process. So while normal fuels would have this, not marker fuel, and that's why it stands out. So basically, in other words, this fuel would be more eco-friendly when burned, when cars actually use it, and it would be more eco-friendly when created. And it takes 8.5 pounds of markers, around that, to make 1 gallon of fuel. So if everybody in Halifax recycled just 1 marker per year, then 2,543 liters of fuel can be made. So that's why I think it's effective. We can really use the fuel that they use to power something like a school bus. Next slide, please. Cheap. So it's cheap because marker recycling is actually free for us. I'm about to introduce something called Crayola Color Cycle, and if you've heard of it before, then you'll know that they take in any type of marker from any brand for free. They partner with select plastic processing companies to convert the plastic into something better, like the diesel fuel process I just mentioned, where they melt it down. And just to clarify, when the boxes are full of markers, all the city of Halifax would be responsible for doing is to print out a shipping label and let the shipping company like FedEx or UPS pick it up. Now, it's important to know that Crayola does pay for shipping, and they do pay for everything about the whole process. So basically, if you choose to actually do marker recycling, you can definitely rest assured that you will never need to allocate a special fund to make marker recycling happen. And that's why I think it's cheap as well. Next slide, please. Necessary. So I've talked about how it's easy, it's effective, and it's cheap. But what might be the most impactful is the fact that marker recycling needs to be done. So it doesn't really matter if the amount of markers thrown away in Halifax in 1 year can make a straight line to Prince Edward Island, which they really do. Or if they can reach the bottom of the Pacific Ocean and then come back up again, which they do. Or if they can stack on top of one another untouched outer space, which they actually do. Crayola itself already makes 465 million markers per year. And yet, I have a question for you. How often do you hear somebody asking you to recycle a Crayola marker? There probably hasn't been that many opportunities for that. But there's still so much we can do with our used markers, and so much more than simply throwing it into the garbage. But still, what I just talked about does not matter nearly as much as I want to say next. What really matters is when you understand the necessity of this yourself. Maybe the next time you see somebody throwing away a marker into the garbage, you'll remember that 600 long years are used to let that one marker decompose. Maybe you'll realize that thousands of dollars will eventually be wasted to reverse the damage that one marker helped to cause. So, what would happen without marker recycling? Well, only the fact that we would be losing a world of potential that could really save the Earth. Maybe, marker recycling is that necessary thing that should be done now. Next slide, please. So, before I leave, I want to redefine what marker recycling is, so you have absolute clarity of it in your mind. Number 1, remember the 3 steps. Cardboard boxes, promoting it, and then shipping them away. Number 2, the end results. It's an extraordinary diesel fuel that we can really use in our everyday lives. And number 3, remember that marker recycling is necessary, but only when you realize that it is. And finally, number 4, remember that it is free. So one last thing before I go is that on the slide that you're seeing right now, surely one of these 4 things, whether it's the 3 steps, the end result, the marker flood, or the cost, appeals to you in some way. Now, I really want you to take that one thing that appeals to you on the screen and just imagine the possibilities that could happen from it, how it could save the world and how it can help Halifax for 1 minute. And whatever you think of in your mind, anything, is now the new and the best definition of marker recycling. That's the best one. And finally, that whatever you think is also the reason why I came to talk to you today. Whatever you think is why I am here. So, before I go, I want to say that just one box in one facility in Halifax would already work a miracle. Thank you.
Alex, thank you very much for your presentation. Could you give us a little background on yourself? Alex, are you a student? And if you are, where are you a student?
Actually, yeah, I am a student. I'm in grade 9, actually, and I don't actually live in Halifax. I actually live in Toronto, so I'm actually calling in from Toronto right now.
Okay. Well, fantastic. Grade 9, that's that's an amazing presentation. Alex, thank you so much. It was well done. I truly appreciate it. Let's see, we'll have some questions from the floor. Councillor Austin, you have a question for Alex.
Yeah, and thanks, Alex, so much for the presentation. I know I learned a lot. I have 2 young kids of my own, and I feel like I'm constantly tripping over dried out markers in the house, and I certainly won't look at them as garbage in the same way ever again. I'm curious, where you're from in Toronto, does the marker recycling like exist there in either the school system or in maybe in the public libraries or the parks and rec? I'm thinking of places where members of where you've got existing buildings where the public could easily be dropping things off.
So actually, that's a really good question, and that's actually not very, that's not really the case right now. There's not really that many people in my city either, or in these places you mentioned, like schools or community centers doing it. But that was actually the reason why I became so interested in it, because I wanted to see if these facilities could do it. So I did talk to a few cities nearby where I lived, if you heard of Mississauga, or areas of the GTA, the Greater Toronto Area, and yeah, I know that Mississauga has been really interested in this, and they wanted to look to see what they could do, by starting a pilot project in their public facilities. But I don't, for all the places I presented to, before I actually gave my presentation, I don't believe they actually started marker recycling. So I was usually the first one to talk about that to them.
Okay. Well, thanks for that. I mean, I'm not sure what it looks like from here, Mr. Chair, but I feel like we have some mechanism for referring reports. We should definitely send this one along, since I think there is potential for waste diversion here.
Yeah, Councillor, I know that Shannon Betts is on the line too, so if a motion could be created to look for a staff report on a possible pilot program here, if that's something you desire or another committee member desires to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think usually our practice is we bring something back at the next meeting, so perhaps we can all go away and kind of put our heads together as to what that might look like. I see there's some of my colleagues wish to comment, so I'll stop proceduring our meeting.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lovelace, I believe you're next.
Mr. Chair, and thank you, Alex, for this presentation. I recall when my kids were in daycare, we recycled markers. We had a bin, where the pens and markers and so on would be put in. And I don't know where they went, but I know that was a program. They also collected batteries, and all kinds of other items that could be recycled. But I do know that there was a family here in HRM, or maybe the district of Chester, I'm not sure, it was in the Hubbards area, who collected markers and so on, and used Staples actually to ship, a whole host of markers, pens, different kinds of things through a Staples program. But you're right, if you go to the What Goes Where app that we have to determine where the garbage goes, or where the item goes, it does tell you to go to the, in the garbage. But other items such as batteries, for example, or car batteries or what have you, there are clear indication of, it doesn't need to go in the garbage. Actually, here is an alternative place to take it or to put this instead. Of putting it in the garbage. So you've raised a really important point, and we do have community centers and libraries and all kinds of other places that could be collecting these items. So I just want to say, Alex, thanks so much, and our future is bright with people like you. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And next, Kathy Daigle-Gammon, you have the floor, Kathy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Oh, my land of mercy, Alex. This was one of the nicest presentations. And when you said that you were grade 9, I just fell off my chair. So impressive and so well delivered. And even the colors you've used in the presentation, exceptional. So my sincere compliments. And really, truly, I don't know why we can't do this. I think that even in terms of going to the Department of Education and seeing what could happen in our schools, all of those kinds of things, that there is something that absolutely can be done around marketing recycling. So thank you very, very, very much.
Thank you, Councillor. So I don't see anybody else on the board. So Alex, well done. That's fantastic. I see Shannon Betts. Shannon, so what would be the best way to get direction? Should we come back at another meeting with a motion to ask for a report on this? What would your recommendation be? I see Kelly Denty nodding her head. So either one of you could maybe just give us some direction. That'd be great.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I guess that would be at the discretion of the committee. If you would like a staff report on it, we can definitely come back with some ideas on how we can promote this type of program. One simple thing I know we can do is make an update to our Halifax Recycles app to let residents know that there are other options for diverting markers from the garbage stream. And I know we do work closely with other departments within the municipality, and we're in schools quite often. So it's definitely something that staff can easily promote with those facilities and those organizations as we visit them. So, there is definitely an opportunity that we could encourage marker recycling boxes be placed in those public buildings.
Well, thank you. So, Councillor Austin, did you want to come back on that with that official request, or did you want to come back at another committee meeting to do that?
I mean, if we don't want to complicate it, we could just move a motion here requesting a staff report on marker recycling and leave it pretty open-ended to allow Shannon and her crew to put something in. I mean, I'm always more cautious when it comes to motions. I like to circle back, but if the committee wanted to, I mean, I'd be happy to move something like that.
I would second that.
So I think, Madam Clerk, we have a request for a staff report on a market recycling program, and we have a seconder. Is there any discussion on that? Seeing no discussion, we'll have a vote, and all those in favor of having a report, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Well, that carries. Alex, thank you very much for your presentation. So we are going to take a look at it. That's our commitment to you, and we thank you for reaching out to us here in Halifax, and good luck to you and your endeavors. And once again, we're all very impressed that you're in grade 9, so well done, Alex. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. And before I go, is there like any way I could is there any contact I can follow up with or anything? Because since I live in Toronto, I'm not very familiar with how things work here. Is there anyone Shannon's contact or something that I can get in touch with to move on with this or anything?
Absolutely. Well, Madam Clerk, if you could share Shannon Bett's contact information with Alex, she'd be more than happy to. She's nodding on the screen. Be more than happy to connect and let you know where we're going with it. And make sure you come in once the borders are come down, Alex, and COVID-19 is lessened. You make sure you come and visit us in Halifax.
Okay. I actually went to Halifax once. It was really, really nice with my family. And
well,
yeah, we
good.
had a really good time.
Well, we're glad to hear that. Do come back. Thank you, Alex, very much. Thank you, colleagues. Great presentation. We're now going to move on to item number 11, information items brought forward, and 11.1, hydrogen and decarbonizing Halifax. This was an information report that came to this committee, and I have requested that this come back to the committee in a presentation. And Shannon Minima, I believe you're online now. Is that correct, Shannon?
Hello, Chair. Yes, I am.
So Shannon, how about the pressure of that to follow Alex in grade 9? And so you thought you were going to get through this, here's my slides, but now there's a lot of pressure. It's like in show business, never follow a kid or never follow a dog. So the pressure's on to you and your team. So
yeah, now I'm feeling bad because I'm actually going to sit back and relax and let Kevin and Barathi do all the hard work today. They authored the report. They are the subject matter experts, and they're going to give you just a brief overview of basically the meat of the report, and then open it up for questions from there. So if we're ready, we can pass it on. And I think Kevin's going to kick things off, and we've got some slides that the clerk's office will share.
So, Madam Clerk, if you put the slide deck up, please.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, thanks so much,
Kevin,
Shannon, and sorry.
The floor is yours, Kevin.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Environment Sustainable Standing Committee. As Shannon mentioned, we'll be giving a brief overview of the information report that went to Council last month about hydrogen and decarbonizing Halifax. So next slide, please. So Council has seen this slide a number of times in the past. This is the wedge diagram that outlines the full suite of actions that must be completed by both the municipality and the community to achieve our target of 75% emission reduction over 2016 levels by 2030 and net zero emission by 2050. The analysis to come up with this wedge diagram and the actions that are recommended are based on currently existing, commercially available, and widely used technologies like solar electric panels, heat pumps, electric vehicles, etc. What you will notice when you look at our 2050 target is that by implementing the actions and the technologies that are currently well used and well understood today, there will still be about 300 kilotons of emissions that will need to be offset to actually achieve that net zero emission target by 2050. And this will be done, and in the Halifax report, it states that this will be done with carbon offsets or new and evolving technologies. And one of those potential technologies is hydrogen. Next slide, please. So what is hydrogen? Well, hydrogen is one of the most abundant and most basic elements on Earth. Consists of only one proton, and it occurs naturally on Earth through a compound with other elements to form water and hydrocarbons like methane. It is an energy carrier like that of electricity, and it is very dense, meaning that it can deliver and store about 2 to 3 times more energy when compared to other liquid hydrocarbons. While it is very dense, there are no real major safety concerns beyond those commonly associated with other similar concentrated fuels. And the fact that hydrogen is really, really light, hydrogen gas is really light. If there are leaks, it disperses fairly quickly in air, which makes it actually difficult to ignite. There are no end-use emissions associated with hydrogen. However, there can be emissions associated with its production. Next slide, please. So there are 3 different types of hydrogen production and that are classified into 3 different colors. So as I said before, hydrogen pure hydrogen doesn't really occur naturally. It's usually combined with other elements. So the first form of hydrogen production is gray hydrogen, which uses steam reforming, which combines high temperature steam and a methane source, which is typically natural gas, to produce pure hydrogen. This is the least cost method, and it is the most widely used. About 95% of the hydrogen production is done through gray hydrogen. The only issue with this from an environmental standpoint is that the byproduct is carbon dioxide, which is released into the atmosphere. Blue hydrogen is essentially the same method of production as gray hydrogen. However, the CO2 emissions are captured and sequestered, typically underground in salt caverns. The third is green hydrogen, where hydrogen is produced through electrolysis, and electrolysis is a process where electricity is used to separate water into its hydrogen and oxygen atoms. The byproduct in that case is oxygen. And for this method to be truly, truly green, the electricity that is used in electrolysis needs to be supplied from a renewable source. If that is the case, there are virtually no emissions with the production of green hydrogen. Next slide, please. In the context of Halifax, green hydrogen is viewed as the potential solution for decarbonizing some of the more difficult sectors within our community. Next slide. The first being transportation. The 2016 Halifax baseline analysis found that about 20% of community emissions currently comes from the transportation sector, and heavy transport makes up about 7.5% of that, or about 1.5% of the total community emissions. It's suggested that early adopters of hydrogen fuel for transport will be long-haul trucks, delivery fleets, trains, and potentially boats or naval transport. Next slide. The way that hydrogen works in transportation is through a fuel cell, so hydrogen fuel cell, where the hydrogen that is stored on board reacts with oxygen across an electrochemical cell, similar to like a battery, to produce electricity that essentially runs the drivetrain. This technology has some really solid advantages for heavy transport over the standard battery electric, such as long ranges, since the hydrogen fuel can be stored on the vehicle itself. A lot of hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles have a range of 800 kilometers, and the refueling experience is similar to that of diesel or gas refueling. So heavy transport, they can go the long distances, they can fill up without having to stop and recharge a battery. Also, the fuel cost for hydrogen fueling is similar to that of DC fast chargers, so electric vehicle fast chargers, and it's fairly efficient when you think about space requirements. When you think of direct current fast chargers, you do need quite a bit of electrical equipment like transformers, so that essentially is not needed. Next slide, please. There's some fantastic work happening across North America in the transportation sector relating to hydrogen. So in BC, there should be about 6 hydrogen fueling stations in operation by the end of the year. And BC is also the home to Ballard Power Systems, which is a world-renowned manufacturer and developer of fuel cell solutions, so fuel cells for buses and so forth. In Alberta, the Alberta Zero Emission Truck Electrification Collaboration, so AZTEC, is running a demonstration project currently, which will see 2 long-range hydrogen fuel transport trucks operate range of 700 kilometers. The first time a vehicle of this size that range. Down south in the States, California is really leading the charge on hydrogen adoption and just zero emission vehicle adoption in general. They have about 42 fuel cell buses in operation, about 18 fueling stations in development, and in San Francisco, they're actually piloting the first hydrogen-powered ferry in North America. And not included on this slide, but also something I think is worth noting, is that California has also banned the sale of gas-powered vehicles by 2035, as has Quebec, which will be supportive of other zero-emission transportation methods. Next slide, please.
So Halifax Transit conducted examine the feasibility of various fuels for the future transit fleet, and that included hydrogen fuel cell technology. And although the report has not yet been released, they found out there were several key benefits to hydrogen. And one of the main benefits is that hydrogen fuel transit is expected to have a greater range because of its greater energy density. And so the available range between refueling is higher and making it comparable with the current diesel fleet. It also reduces the need for any major route structure changes. Hydrogen also provides service resiliency during power outages, which is more difficult to achieve with all battery electric. And there is no power contingency with hydrogen transit because the energy stored as hydrogen is converted to electricity by the fuel cell in the vehicle. And there are also some barriers associated with hydrogen. The number one being hydrogen fuel cell buses cost twice as much as battery electric and 4 times that of traditional diesel buses. And there are negligible fuel savings associated with hydrogen, unlike battery buses. And currently there is no local source of green hydrogen in Nova Scotia, and emissions from transporting green hydrogen into the province would negate any of the benefits. And as more jurisdictions across Canada are making the transition to battery electric buses, the lack of vendor support for hydrogen fuel cell buses makes for an even more difficult transition. Next slide, please. The 2016 baseline report showed that 70% of community-wide emissions in HRM came from our existing commercial and residential buildings, and a big chunk of that was space heating. Our fuel source for space heating is predominantly natural gas and to some extent electricity. Replacing natural gas with hydrogen is being explored extensively in the European Union with some demonstration projects in the UK and in France. Green hydrogen could effectively come to replace natural gas as a source of heating fuel in the long term. Next slide, please. So there are potential venues for integration of hydrogen with the natural gas grid in HRM. The municipality facilities alone consumed about 187,000 gigajoules of natural gas annually. And the current costs surrounding the hydrogen infrastructure, coupled with the non-availability of local green hydrogen, makes a fuel switch from natural gas to hydrogen harder. However, when green hydrogen becomes available locally, it can be blended with natural gas. And the natural gas infrastructure in Nova Scotia is relatively new. It's non-corrosive, non-porous polyethylene piping, which makes blending with hydrogen much more feasible. Research is still being done on it though, and it is expected that about 20% blending can be achieved in the long term. Next slide, please. All of the applications that we've discussed in the previous slides are supported by a report released in the fall of 2020 called Feasibility Study of Hydrogen Production, Storage, Distribution, and Use in the Maritimes. It was conducted by CEN and the Art Clean Energy Solutions in partnership with Heritage Gas Limited, the Nova Scotia Offshore Energy Research Association, the Nova Scotia Department of Energy and Mines, etc. And the study found out that hydrogen has the potential to deliver up to 22% of the region's energy by 2050, and thereby reducing emissions by about 21%. Nova Scotia also has high potential for hydrogen production. The high wind generation potential in the region makes it possible to produce green hydrogen from the renewable wind resource. And based on our renewable goals for the province, as more and more renewables are added to the grid mix, green hydrogen is a great non-emitting resource that can provide grid reliability and also balance the intermittency of renewables. Next slide, please. So green hydrogen can be used with a host of other tools in climate action, and HRM can show support for hydrogen by partnering in demonstration projects. For example, Heritage Gas is proposing an electrolysis plant that will be powered by 4 megawatts of wind energy, thereby producing green hydrogen. HRM can purchase some of this green hydrogen produced locally to reduce our building stock emissions. We can also support the use of hydrogen in applications for heating, fuel cell electric vehicles, and fueling infrastructure in any of our community retrofit programs. HRM could also advocate for decarbonized electric grid and ZEB mandate in Nova Scotia. And there's currently also a discussion of an Atlantic hydrogen working group with some of the same folks that did the feasibility study mentioned earlier for hydrogen. And HRM is open to participating, should be open to participating as need be. The group's work will be aligned with the National Strategy for Hydrogen and the Canadian Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association. The Nova Scotia Department of Energy and Mines supports the establishment of this working group, although their role in the group or the role of any of the stakeholders or any of the details have not been determined yet. So that was an overview of hydrogen, its feasibility in the Maritimes, what role it can play in Halifax, and how HRM can actively support academia and industry in realizing hydrogen's potential. Thank you, and we are now available for further questions.
Well, thank you very much for that presentation. Fantastic information. I'm looking to see if there's any questions from the floor before I ask my questions or make my statements. Not seeing any. You know, it's funny, well done in the presentation, because my questions were going to be about best practice, the biggest obstacles, what's the province doing. And you answered all that, Mike, so I can't even ask those questions, but I mean, because you answered all those. I mean, it's exciting to see what other places are doing, though. BC and Alberta, you know, California, how cool would that be as we talk about rapid ferries, you know, that once we get to it, that's a hydrogen ferry. I mean, there's a window of opportunity here too, right? And so, and looking at the obstacles, I mean, the cost, obviously, no local source, and where we go from here on this. I mean, we need to keep this conversation going. I know, Shannon, that's part of your strategy in doing that. I know former Councillor Zarowski was very excited about the hydrogen technology, and he was very frustrated also because we want to do this today, and it's just not feasible or possible to do it today. However, how do we get on the leading edge as BC and Alberta and California is doing that? So I do see a question from Catherine Morris. Councillor, you have the floor if you wish. I think you're still muted, Catherine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation. Really leading edge kind of stuff here that we don't hear about that often, so thank you very much. As political leaders, we have to find practical ways to do things, and unfortunately that often involves money. I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about if we were able to enter into a partnership on an electrolysis project, what type of scale are we talking about, and what would that potentially cost? Do you have any idea? It was helpful, for example, to know that the hydrogen bus is 4 times the cost of a diesel bus. Just gives some sort of sense of scale. So I'm wondering if you could maybe comment on what might be required to partner with Heritage Gas.
Thank you, Councillor through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. We've had some conversations with Heritage Gas as well as with the federal and provincial governments about the mechanism that we could do this, which is through a power purchase agreement. And that's something that we're considering internally that would go to council if we were to do that. And so working on business cases and how does that align with Halifax and things like that. And so when Heritage Gas was putting their funding application in with the province, they wondered if we would be supportive of just exploring that idea, where if they did blend some green hydrogen in, would we pay a premium to be able to offset some of our emissions and achieve our goals. So that seems to be the primary tool that we would use in purchasing green alternative energy as a municipal government at this time. I don't know, Kevin, if you had anything else that, okay, yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Any other questions? So Shannon, to you and your team, fantastic. We need to keep this going. We appreciate the. Oh, I see. I apologize, Kathy. I missed you on the list.
That's okay.
You have the floor, Kathy. My apologies.
Oh, no problem at all. Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things that earlier today, some of the councillors, we did have a presentation from Heritage Gas, and I remember when Heritage Gas made a previous presentation to this committee, like one of the first maybe meetings that I was on. But there's a lot of talk about, and I think somebody referenced about some of the work that's being done in the European Union and especially in the UK. And so one of the things I was wondering about, and in the slide, was just how do we support and actively supporting academia and the industry. I'm wondering if there is a learning exchange, some formal mechanism to be able to follow what's happening in some of the other countries that are doing some significant leadership around hydrogen potential.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, I would say that is largely being handled right now by the major stakeholders. Heritage Gas is a really great partner with HRM, and they are one of the most active stakeholders in both the creation and the implementation of our climate plan. And they, as an organization, as a business, have been collaborating with those European leaders and with all the key players nationally. And I think that's the idea of the working group that they're proposing right now. And they've asked us if we wanted a municipal voice at the working group, would that be something the city would consider? Obviously, the city would take that away and consider it. But I think there's some good collaboration already that we can basically just stay tapped into at this point.
Okay, thank you. I think I might want to know a little bit more about what that group is. So maybe on a side conversation, I can learn a little bit more. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Again, Shannon, to you and your team, thank you very much as always. We really appreciate it. Fantastic work as we move forward. Thanks for your time today. Moving right along then, committee, we are going to reports. 12.1, the staff report on 12.1.1, naturalization initiatives update. If who will be willing to put that on the floor? We have a committee member who will put that on the floor, please. Councillor Cleary, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you.
Just gonna go to my other screen here so I can see what the heck it is I'm doing. So that's the naturalization 12.11.
That's correct, Councillor.
I move that the Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee recommend to Halifax Regional Council that the Naturalization Initiative review period be extended by 1 year to December 31st, 2021 to fully include the pilot projects that were to have occurred in 2020 for monitoring towards a future naturalization guideline and policy.
I'll second that. Councillor Daigle-Gammon.
Second by Councillor Daigle-Gamble. Councillor Austin, sorry, did I see Councillor Austin? I thought I did. Sorry, Councillor Cleary, do you have anything to add to it?
I wholeheartedly support the extension. I do have a question though. So when I looked at this very briefly, I saw there was, I think, 3 different sort of pilot areas. My recollection of when we talked about this was a much larger kind of view of, we were looking at a bunch of different areas. did we pare that down, or was it always just those 3 areas for the pilot?
So I believe online. Oh, good to see you. How are you?
Hi.
Namaste.
I'm the policy coordinator with Parks and Recreation in the policy and planning group. It was always going to be a few pilot sites in this trial period to test the waters and see, you know, what would need to be, you know, what kind of information we could put together into a formal policy or guideline moving forward. So it was always going to be just a few pilot sites.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I hope one of the things is to train the contact center so that when the 311 calls come in, we have really good explanation on what the heck we're doing and why we're doing it. Because it's amazing to me, just the grass could grow on a field an extra inch and someone's going to call that, why aren't we cutting that grass? And so while I fully support this, I just want to make sure that we're covered and people know what to say and why we're doing it. Thanks.
Yeah, you know, that's a good point, Councillor Cleary. I think it ties into, you know, the desire to have that perfect lawn, right? You know, Councillor Cleary has 2 dandelions on his lawn, and I'm complaining about it, right? So, yeah, good. No, I don't see anything else, so the motion's on the floor. We have a call for the question. And the question's been called for. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you very much, colleagues and staff. Next, we have 12.2 members of standing committee. We see none. Boards and committees, none. I don't believe there are any motions. Seeing none. There's nothing in camera. There's no added items. Any notice of motions, committee members? Seeing none. If we need it, the next meeting is April the 1st, 2021. And so we ask for an adjournment.
So moved.
So moved. Thank you very much, Kathy Daigle-Gammon, and to all the members of the committee. Thank you to all staff. Thank you to all those that presented today. Thank you, and boy, especially grade 9 student Alex from Toronto. That was outstanding, man. That's pretty cool. All the best to everybody. You guys stay safe. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
David, we're waiting for a coffee, buddy. Don't you?